What's the best way to get started with standardized development environments? I'd suggest maybe just use Daytona. And the way that that might work is that you would install the Daytona extension, and then inside of your GitHub or GitLab, you'd get this button. And if you hit this button without doing any other work, you're going to get an environment. And it's going to look a little bit like this. Inside of that environment is going to be a kitchen sink image. So by default, we use an image from Microsoft called Universal, and it has a number of different languages and tools already installed in it. So Go, Java, Python, Node, a bunch of other tools. And if you do nothing else, this is still probably better than a README that people have to follow and do manual steps, take a bunch of time, but also that ages over time so that somebody who started 4 months after gets a completely different set of versions, and then people have to keep that up to date. And if anybody makes any mistakes, well, you got to kind of figure out how you're going to start over. In a remote environment, every time you start the environment, you get the latest. And if you make a mistake, you just delete it and get a new one. And so I think that's a great way to get started. But what if you want to do a little bit more and actually start to not only control the environment, but control the IDE, what extensions are installed, and the workflow? Well, then you're going to want to start to use Dev Container. And so what that might look like is here's that same Go application, but in VS Code. And I just happen to be running this VS Code local. You could be running this in Daytona, whatever you want. And so in here, we're going to use a web framework called Gin. It's going to run on port 3000. It's going to basically serve up strings. So let's start with the dev container. We're going to use the command palette. And we are going to look for add dev container configuration files. Now you have a choice here. You can either add the Go base container, which is a great option. So it will be parameterizable. You'll be able to set all those pieces and parts up. But I want to show a little bit more of dev container. So I'm going to make a different decision. I'm going to use Ubuntu and I'll use Jammy. And then I get an option to select features, and features install on top of that Jammy config. And it might be anything else you might need. And you can install lots of features. So in this case, we'll install Go. And that'll be the next way to get it. But what if we needed the AWS CLI? Or if we needed the Azure CLI? Or the Google Cloud CLI? Maybe we wanted JQ. Or what else? Maybe we want the Go release. We want the Go releaser application. Those are all in there. And if they're not in there, you can go ahead and write a feature for your organization that has exactly what you need installed exactly how you need it. So let's go ahead and start with this. And we're going to configure options. So by default, you'll get the latest, but you can also use options to pin. So I'm going to go ahead and pin the Go version to 121. Now, we are using that Jammy base and we added a feature. Now we could restart here, but there's a couple more things we can do that I think are pretty cool. Let's go back. I'm just to clean out some of this boilerplate. Let's go back to, what if I need the extension? I want the Go extension. So let's go search for that. Go. And I could install it, or I can click on it, go to the gear, and say add it to the dev container file. And now if we go look at dev container, so if we go to dev container, there it is. It's in dev container. So from here, what else could we do? Well, there is a way. Grab this. What if we wanted to configure that extension and make sure that everyone uses the same configuration? What we can do is we can take the settings snippet that we would use and add it. So in this case, we're going to set the settings so that we use the default formatter and everyone's going to use the same formatter, and that we use the language server and we turn on a feature within language server and make sure that everybody gets the same feature. So now we're using the same environment with the same tools installed, the same IDE, the same extensions installed, configured the same way. Well, that's pretty cool, but are there some workflow additions that we could make that would make it even better? So let's go back and remember, if we go look at this main Go, that this runs on port 3000. Well, we have a couple of options for that with dev container. So we can go and add a new section where we add port attributes. And so what this does is it says, hey, by the way, if you see port 3000, go ahead and automatically open a preview window for that. That's pretty cool. But that still requires that the user knows how to start the application and actually that they do that work themselves. What if we could automatically do that when we start up the workspace? And so we're going to go down here and we're going to add one more thing, the post attach command. So when a user attaches their IDE to this workspace, we're going to go ahead and run go main.go. And so now what will happen is when we start this workspace, we're going to get Ubuntu with Go 121 installed. We're going to get the IDE configured with Go extension. That extension configured how we want it. We're going to run the application, build and run the application, and then we're going to open a preview window. And the developer doesn't necessarily have to know all of those things. They just need to know how to write Go. So let's go ahead and build this. So we're going to go ahead and save it. And then we're going to go to rebuild and reopen in a container. And we might as well watch the logs because it's always fun to watch logs scroll by. And what's going to happen now is it's going to go ahead and pull down that base container for us and automatically start the Ubuntu Jammy container. And then on top of that, it's going to install the Go language. And then we should be ready to go here in just a moment. So you can see this scroll by. It's happening relatively quickly. And now it's doing the run, but it's also doing the build. So this build will be done in a second, and then we will have everything we need and we'll be up and running. So there's the build. Now if we run this and we've got hello world and we can see the logs scrolling on by, we can open main. And then we go to main and we're going to split this and go to simple browser. Let's flip this around. There we go. So now we can just watch this and we have everything we need and it's all in dev container. And if we commit this, then every time we open this, whether it's in Daytona or in VS Code, we'll get everything we need out of the box. And the best part is, even if you just did this bit, it would be incrementally better. And then as you start to learn more about dev container, you could add this bit and then this bit and incrementally over time improve. So we'll have more about trade-offs that you would make between what's the right trade-off to make between the image and the features. How could you speed up your builds? There'll be lots more to talk about, but that is the easiest way to get started.